Ladies and gentlemen of the press, good afternoon and welcome to the Dankwa Institute. Thank you for your presence here this afternoon. This is the maiden edition of our planned monthly encounter with the media for this year. Today's discussion or press briefing is titled Analysis of the Ghanaian Economy with reference from 2009 to 2023. A lot of misrepresentations are often made about the Ghanaian economy, and as an institute with the welfare of the ordinary Ghanaian at heart, we have a duty to speak to the real facts about the performance of the Ghanaian economy. Riding on the emotions of Ghanaians to perpetuate half-truth in anticipation to win political power could be detrimental to our democratic gains as a nation. Here at Dankwa Institute, we have a firm belief that a detailed analysis and discussion of facts through research and data provides the good people of Ghana with more clarity, information, and context on national issues of interest. In the wake of the bold vision statement by the leader and flag bearer of the NPP, the New Patriotic Party, on Wednesday, 7 February 2024, the Dankwa Institute has followed with keen interest the discussions across the different media scape. Today, we as an institute present to you facts that are related to the vision statement emphasized by the leader of the NPP on the following thematic areas: GDP growth, inflation, exchange rate, debt to GDP ratio, fiscal policy, credit rating, and primary balance. These macroeconomic indicators are key pillars of every economy, and they provide the fundamental building blocks that will ensure sustainable development for our dear nation, Ghana. The understanding provided for such issues to enable the Ghanaian listener and viewer who is interested and has not been strong, and we believe that there are many issues that need more detailed discussion, and so we will be coming up with research to further enhance these discussions as and when necessary. Hence, our media encounters will provide more information and clarity on issues to fill a likely gap existing as a result of misinformation and false propaganda. And I would like to take this again. The main purpose of this encounter is to fill that information gap that exists between you, the media, and the ordinary Ghanaian. Such critical information we at Dankwa Institute believe and acknowledge would, by all rights and standards, provide clarity on pertinent economic issues in our motherland. I first begin by addressing today's press conference by tackling the issue of gross domestic product, otherwise termed GDP growth. Friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, gross domestic product GDP holds significance as it provides insights into the scale and performance of an economy. GDP quantifies the monetary worth of final goods and services, specifically those bought by consumers, that is the ordinary Ghanaians when you go to Makala, Market, KJTR, and so on and so forth, produced within a country, that is Ghana, during a specified time frame, such as a quarter or a year. It counts all output generated within Ghana's borders, including goods and services intended for sale in our market or in the market, as well as certain non-market productions such as defense or education services offered by the government of the day. Friends from the media, individuals often seek to understand whether an economy's overall production of goods and services is expanding or contracting. And this is one key issue, critical issue, that you have our mothers and fathers and uncles always wondering, and they are always in wonder. So, to derive GDP or to be able to use GDP as a good measure of welfare management, we first need to talk about what we call the real GDP, because GDP cannot be compared on nominal basis, because GDP yesterday cannot be the same because inflation keeps changing. So to derive real GDP, its nominal value must be adjusted to reflect price fluctuations or changes, enabling us to discern whether the increase in output, that is the general output within the country in terms of production, stems from heightened production or solely from price increment, because the fact that once price increases, output can also double, but it might not necessarily imply that production has increased. So we need to adjust for this. Therefore, the growth of real GDP serves as a commonly used indicator of the overall health of an economy, and for that matter, Ghana's economy. Generally, an upsurge in real GDP signifies positive economic conditions. Strong growth in real GDP typically correlates with increased employment opportunities as companies expand their operations and hire more workers. So as GDP grows, it simply means that all things being equal with all other factors held constant, there is the likelihood that because we want to triple production or want to double production, we will need more hands in terms of labor, and for that matter, employment is created within the economy. Conversely, during periods of GDP contraction, such as those experienced in numerous countries during recent global economic challenges in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian-Ukraine war, the employment rate tends to decline. In other words, especially during COVID-19, we saw most companies laying people off because there wasn't that much labor required. So GDP is typically computed by the National Statistics Agency, that is in Ghana, the Ghana Statistical Service, the GSS, which aggregates data from numerous sources such as consumption, investment, government spending, and net export, that's the difference between import and export. However, in conducting these calculations, the GSS, or the Ghana Statistical Service, appears to establish international guidelines. In 2011, so this is just to give you the premise onto how economic growth is determined, just to kill that propaganda that spreads, to create the false impression that normally politicians may be behind the manipulation of GDP, which is used to measure the welfare of people. So in 2011, immediately after commencement of the oil production, that is oil discovered in 2013 in commercial quantities, the country recorded a historical GDP growth rate of 13.95% in 2011, approximately 14% growth in 2011, when oil had been discovered and then explored in commercial quantities in 2010. This growth rate continuously declined to 2.86% in 2014 and further down to 2.12% in 2015, before rising marginally to 3.3% in 2016. Friends from the media, our research confirms that Dr. Bawumia's rightly pointed to the fact that between 2013 and 2016, Ghana's GDP growth averaged 3.9%. Comparatively, as Dr. Bawumia emphasized, between 2017 and 2020, GDP growth surged to an average of 5.3%. In fact, in 2017, GDP actually grew from the 3.3% to 8.12%. The Ghanaian economy witnessed a substantial growth, as I've already acknowledged. While acknowledging that the 2017 economic growth was largely influenced by the oil sector, as I pointed out that GDP growth was a little over 8% in 2017. The non-oil sector growth stood at 4.9% in 2017, showing a positive growth from what we recorded in 2016. The robust GDP growth performance was supported by a significant rise in agricultural growth, GDP growth, climbing from an average of 2.9% between 2013 and 2016 to an average of 6% between 2017 to 2022. Unfortunately, the economy, which was estimated to grow at 7.2% in 2020 before COVID-19 struck, suffered the devastating effect of the pandemic, which we are all witnesses to, causing growth to plummet to 0.51%, the lowest growth rate since 1983. Ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, allow me to further explain the reason for this. Now, remember, GDP growth is calculated by the totality of goods and services, and that is the main reason why I laid that premise before proceeding to do my presentation. As such, when productivity declined with the advent of COVID-19, trade in goods and services declined, and by extension, the GDP growth rate. This phenomenon was experienced in several countries. So Ghana wasn't a stand country alone, as it has been parroted in most places. We find that GDP growth rate in major economies of the world also fell. And here I provide empirical evidence to back these claims. For instance, Germany's growth rate fell from 1.1% in 2019 to minus 3.8% in 2020. The UK's GDP growth rate also declined from 1.6% in 2019 to minus 11% in 2020. The US, the almighty United States of America, had its GDP growth, which was growing at 2.3% in 2019, declining to minus 2.8% in 2020. India's economy, or the GDP growth of India, also declined from 3.9% to negative 5.8%. Italy's economy, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, also fell from 0.5% in 2019 to minus 9% in 2020. Japan's economy was also not spared, ladies and gentlemen. It also shrank. Japan's economy also shrank. At that time, it was growing at a minus 0.4%. It further shrank to a minus 4.2%. The economy of Israel, ladies and gentlemen, was also not spared. Israel's economy, which was growing at 3.8% in 2019, also witnessed a negative 1.5% growth in 2020. And last but not the least, Switzerland economy, which was growing at 1.2% in 2019, also fell to minus 2.3% in 2020. And ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, this data is available on the IMF's website. So I urge you to go to the IMF's website to check some of this information that is being put across here. Now, given the above background and the fact that Ghana could not also access the international capital market, ladies and gentlemen, the only option left was central bank finance. That is, if you are handicapped and you don't have any option, and you have a mother who has money sitting somewhere, then obviously it will be better to fall on your mother for assistance rather than to go hungry and perish. So that was exactly what happened in this case. We at DI would like to officially affirm our agreement with Dr. Bawumia's statement regarding the Bank of Ghana's decision to provide essential financing to the government of Ghana during that pivotal juncture. As understood by Bell et al. 2023, that is a study, an empirical study that was conducted in April 2023 last year. In normal times and in crisis, central banks should be judged on whether they fulfill their core mandate or not. The primary objective, thus, of the Bank of Ghana is to maintain stability in the general price level or level of prices, as stated under Section 3 of the Bank of Ghana Act 22, which was amended to Act 612. The financing extended by the Bank of Ghana to the government was of a temporary nature. Specifically, the Bank of Ghana has abstained from providing any financing to the government in 5 of the past 7 years, as affirmed in the recent statement of Dr. Bawumia. And these years were 2017, there was zero financing. 2018, there was zero financing. 2019, there was zero central bank financing. 2021, there was zero central bank financing. And even last year, 2023, there was zero central bank financing to the government of Ghana. This data is also available at the Bank of Ghana's website that I urge and challenge you from the media to also double check. What the economists will call an outlier situation. So that was just once off in a while situation that occurred. Friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the Ghanaian economy, together with the effect of the Russian-Ukraine war exacted on the global economy in the year 2020 and 2022, can never be discounted. Ladies and gentlemen, again and again, as researchers, We will continue to emphasize that the data speaks to the fact that these two events can never be underrated, and there are documented empirical evidence to support this claim, both from the World Bank, the IMF, and the IFC. Indeed, following the pandemic, International Monetary Fund, that is the IMF, estimated global median GDP to have dropped by 3.9% from 2019 to 2020, making it the worst downturn, ladies and gentlemen, since the Great Depression that occurred over 100 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, as far as this data is also concerned on the GDP growth rate, we also provide a graph that empirically, pictorially, also shows this trend that you can also cross-check with that data from the Central Bank of Ghana, which is the Bank of Ghana. As reported by the Ghana Statistical Service in 2019, poor economic growth performance had a substantial impact on the well-being of Ghanaians. The per capita GDP experienced a continuous decline from $2,437 in 2013 to $1,726 in 2015. So per capita, that is, if you take the total GDP in the country and you divide the population at that time, that is what you get the per capita. That is the income per head, which is a crude proxy of welfare measurement. In 2013, this per capita was calculated to be, in 2013, to be at 2,437. By 2015, this had dropped to 1,726. However, it rebounded to 2,035 in 2017 and further increased to 2,214 in 2018. Even in the face of economic challenges, the per capita GDP stood at $2,353.04 at the end of December 2022, the year that Ghana had one of its highest or worst depreciation in terms of the cedi against the US dollar. The agricultural sector was not spared. It recorded a meager growth rate of 0.9% in 2014 when there was no global exogenous shocks. In 2015, it also recorded a growth of 2.3%, and in 2016, it had reached a growth of 2.9%, according to data from the Ghana Statistical Service. However, the growth rate of agriculture sector surged from 2.9% in 2016 to 6.1% in 2017, friends from the media, and kept a sustained growth up to 2019. The data, friends from the media, suggests that advancements in the agriculture sector have led to a 45% decrease in rice imports, declining from an 805,000 metric tons to 440,000 metric tons between 2021 and 2023. Because one of the key things that as economists and as researchers we have always advocated for is to have import substitution. How can local production be a substitute for foreign production? That is, in other words, we try to create jobs when we create local production. So in the case of the rice, these are local rice, and it simply means that more Ghanaians are being employed into these sectors. That's why rice production has actually gone up. Friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, recognizing that increasing inflation can dampen GDP growth, we now shift our focus to examining inflation trends in Ghana. So I look at inflation trends in Ghana from 2011 to 2022. Inflation, serving as a gauge for the overall rise in prices within a specific period in an economy, stand out as the most accurate indicator for assessing economic hardship. In a more recent study, rising inflation has been found to cause banking sector losses, prompting banks to reduce lending and ultimately affecting economic activity. And I'm talking about the study by Agarwal and Baron 2023, of which, friends from the media, I challenge you to look up this study. According to data sourced from the Bank of Ghana, the headline inflation consistently rose from 2011 to 2015, with a marginal decrease in 2016. The 2012 administration inherited a headline inflation rate of 8.8%. So before 2012, that was the inflation that was persistent, 8.8%. However, this increased to 13.5% by 2013, and then escalated further to 17% in 2014, reaching 17.7% in 2015, an astronomical increase in inflation. Notably, this period was also marked by challenges such as the power outages, which was popularly dubbed as doomsday, in addition to escalating inflation. All these occurred while the global environment, friends from the media, remained relatively stable. Between 2017 and 2019, we witnessed a consistent decline in headline inflation, reaching its lowest point in over 28 years at 7.6% in September 2019. So the inflation rate that had escalated to about 7.7% dropped to 7.6% by September 2019. Even amid the challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic, inflation rate was lower than it was in December 2016. Notably, for a continuous period of 61 months, inflation level was below 15.4%. That was recorded in December 2016, post-2016. It is noteworthy that global inflation surged from 1.55% in 2016 to 8.27% by the end of 2022 as a result of the pandemic and the Russian-Ukraine war, marking a five-fold increase. Notably, there has been a general rise in living expenses worldwide, propelled by escalations in food prices, energy prices, housing, that is rental, and transportation, because obviously once energy prices goes up, including oil prices of oil, obviously the cost of transportation is going to also go up, all things being equal. By February 2022, Ghana experienced inflation reaching 15.7%, a figure that steadily and eventually peaked at 54% or 54.1%, marking the highest rate over 2 decades in terms of inflation. Ghana wasn't the only country facing such challenges, ladies and gentlemen, considering the time that this event occurred. In June 2022, headline inflation in the US increased by 9.1%, marking one of the highest inflation in recent times for the United States of America, and also in about 40 years for the same country, the United States of America. The UK experienced a 4-decade high inflation rate of 9.1% in May 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, it is proper to put this in context. You have a country that has not seen inflation rate below 2% in almost 20 years. And all of a sudden, within a short period, within a few months, inflation escalates to about 9.1%. You can do the percentage changes, and that is roughly over 500% change in terms of inflation, and that is very huge. As I said, the UK experienced a 4-decade high inflation rate of 9.1% in May 2022, while Germany recorded its highest inflation in 50 years in August 2022, the same year that Ghana also had its highest inflation. And ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, these are the biggest economies that you can point to in the world. While DI acknowledges the accompanying hardships of inflation, it is crucial for the country to recognize the factors contributing to these increases. Under normal conditions and without any global shocks, inflation consistently decreased between 2017 to 2019, a trend that had been persistent for a continuous period of 61 months, friends from the media. It is also true in this case that inflation has since exhibited a notable downward trajectory, decreasing from the 54.1% to 23.2% by December 2023, and it is projected further to decline to the pre-2016 level by mid this year. Friends from the media, exchange rate fluctuations are an important driver of inflation and could therefore have significant implications for the formulation of monetary policy. The expected impact of currency movement on consumer prices will determine how the Bank of Ghana, that is the BOG, should react to them. And recently, when we saw Ghana having one of its highest inflationary rates, we saw the BOG increasing the monetary policy rate, which is the MPR. And this is theoretical based on the economic theory. That is why we saw such an occurrence. A change in the exchange rate will affect production costs, given that most inputs are imported in Ghana, thus resulting in higher prices for final goods. In particular, monetary authorities, and for that matter, the BOG, look beyond the price level effect of an exchange rate movement, but may choose to respond if the impact on inflation is persistent, as we saw in 2022. So you saw the BOG constantly revising the MPR upwards, and this was in line with economic theory trends from the media. With this correlation in mind, we now shift our focus to the exchange rate. An exchange rate, friends from the media, denotes the value of one currency relative to another currency or a set of currencies. In the case of an open economy like Ghana, which extensively participate in global trade or international trade, the exchange rate holds significant economic relevance. Fluctuations in the exchange rate shapes the decisions made by individuals, businesses, and governments alike. These collective decisions, in turn, impact economic activity, inflation rates, and the overall balance of payments. It also affects how the Bank of Ghana conducts monetary policy, and have provided that explanation. Let us break this down even further. In simpler terms, the exchange rate in an import-driven economy like that of us, Ghana, despite the major advancement in agro-processing and industrialization, will remain volatile until we reduce our dependency on imports, which is something that you just can't legislate in a day to avert. On the 7th of January 2013, $1 was exchanged for 1.8725 Ghana cedis. And ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, when I refer to the exchange rate here, I am using the interbank exchange rate. So please take note. However, by the 7th of January 2017, the exchange rate had increased to 4.214% for Ghana cedis for $1. On the whole, the average depreciation of the cedi against the dollar was 17.7% from 2013 to 2016, as Dr. Bawumia articulated in his speech on the 7th of February. From 2017 to 2020, there was a notable reduction in the cedi depreciation rate to an average of 7.5%. And ladies and gentlemen, friends for the media, I want you to take note here. A depreciation rate that was going at around over 17% now declines to 7.5%, and that is a monumental management of the economy. Furthermore, the average cedi depreciation continued to decrease to 6.8% between 2017 and 2021. The Ghana cedi experienced a significant depreciation of 30% by the end of 2022, pushing the average cedi depreciation between 2017 and 2022 to 10.5%. So not even withstanding the impact of global exogenous shocks, if you are looking at the average depreciation of the cedi across this period, the overall or average depreciation was much lower compared to the 17.7% witnessed between 2013 to 2016. Notably, during 2022, many major international trading currencies, including the UK's pound sterling, depreciated against the US dollar. So imagine the almighty pound sterling falling. At an institute, we recognize the economic challenges that the persistent depreciation of the cedi in 2022 imposed on Ghanaians. Why this happened is what we must look at. Before the global crisis emerged, specifically at the close of 2021, the Bank of Ghana boasted over 9.9 billion in gross international reserves, equating to 4.8 months of import cover. So should there be the need, should there be, let's say, an economic phenomenon or a natural phenomenon, and we needed money to fall on. This was the money that we had without necessarily saying that we are going to borrow. This is the money that we had sitting with the central bank as at 2021. This marked one of the highest reserve levels since 1957. This is in stark contrast, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2.8 months of import cover that remained as at December 2016. So I want you to take a note here. At the end of December 2016, our international reserves could only cover 2.8 months imports. However, between 2021, between 2017 to 2021, we had doubled this to almost 5 months import cover, and that is a phenomenal management of the economy, which needs to be acknowledged and noticed. Such a fragile economy, ladies and gentlemen, with reference to the 2.8 months import cover, would have struggled to withstand the profound impacts of the recent global economic crisis that Ghana experienced. So in other words, if you are just supposing that COVID-19, for example, should have struck Ghana's economy in 2016 with just 2.8 months import cover, you could have imagined what would have happened to us. Even with almost 5 months import cover, you saw how people were complaining. So just imagine yourself finding yourself with an import cover of just under 2.8 months. That would have been catastrophic for the ordinary Ghanaian in the general economy as a whole. It is likely that the exchange rate for $1 could have exceeded 25 Ghana cedis, given that our international reserves at 2016 was far lower compared to what we had in 2020 and 2021. And we are prepared to engage in an academic debate on this matter. That if Ghana had gone into COVID-19 with an import cover of 2.8 months, our exchange rate depreciation that we saw would have been far worse than what we saw during COVID-19 and its post-aftermath repercussions. And this is something that we as an institute are open to challenge anyone who would want to engage us in academic debate, and we can interrogate the data and prove whether we are wrong or right. We endorsed the finance minister's position in 2021, asserting at the time that there was no need to turn to the IMF, contrary to calls from skeptics. It is also because in 2021, the impending effects of the Russian-Ukraine war and the ensuing crisis that it had on the world economies were unforeseen. So though the war was there, yet the actual repercussions could not be envisaged. And for that matter, we supported the finance minister that there was no need to go to the IMF at that particular instant. Subsequently, following the war, the global market witnessed a downturn. So the repercussions of the war from Russia-Ukraine war that I'm talking about here, press, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, resulting in the persistent downgrade of numerous economies, Ghana included. Unable to access the global bond markets, the Bank of Ghana had to utilize our reserves to settle the government's foreign-dominated debt. So I talked about the fact that the reserves or the international reserves was very critical. In fact, it is one of the fundamental pillars that saved Ghana plunging into crisis like what we saw in Sri Lanka. And we have this reserve as a result of prudent economic management between the period of 2017 to 2019 before the pandemic set in. Simultaneously, the BOG supplied dollars to the secondary forex market to bolster the value of the local currency, because at the same time, you have traders also demanding for dollars. By June 2022, it became obvious that our reserves were fast depleting, resulting in an urgent need to go to the IMF for a bailout. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, this is the main premise why Ghana had to go to the IMF. Friends from the media, recall that Ghana's debt stock increased by 93 billion cedis, that's the equivalent of about $7 billion in the beginning of 2022 due to the depreciation of the cedi. So not necessarily that Ghana had gone to borrow more money as it has been parroted, but actually as a result of global economic shocks, the debt actually increase without necessarily the country going to the international market or the funds market to borrow. So this is something that we should also take a considerable note of. Now, considering the significant impact of the cedi's depreciation on Ghana's debt stock, we now prioritize debt to GDP ratio as the subsequent variable. Debt to GDP ratio. Friends from the media, we begin by asking a simple question. Why do governments borrow? Why does the NPP government or any other government have to borrow at all? And this is a question that we've many a times pondered over. That in the midst of the abundant natural resources that we find ourselves as a country, why do we need to borrow? And today we would try to answer that question. In normal political discourse in Ghana, especially among the elites, public debt gets a negative press. It is, however, an important economic tool and the source of investment financing for governments all over the world. Governments borrow for many reasons, including the following, and I'm going to list each reason why a government borrows and explain it to you. One, to fund deficits, the imbalance between the government spending and its revenue. So when government spending exceeds its projected revenue, there will be a deficit. And for that matter, government needs to borrow to fund that gap that exists. To manage revenue fluctuations within the fiscal year. Revenue projections are made during the beginning of the fiscal year. So for example, you saw the 2024 budget statement being read in November 2023. During the reading of the annual budget statement, however, they do not flow in at a rate to match the rate of expenditures. So as and when we expect revenues to come in and as and when we expect revenues to be released, there is not that simultaneous match. For example, teachers need to be paid. Lawyers need to be paid. Nurses need to be paid. Doctors need to be paid. You cannot say the fact that your money or you expect a certain amount of money from a certain company or entity that has not been credited to the account of government. So you are going to tell teachers and doctors that, oh, we beg you, please don't eat for this man. No, that would be a no-no. So government need to find a way to make sure that its commitment is fulfilled. And this is one of the reasons why the government of the day has to borrow. Another critical point is to balance boom and bust cycles. And what do I mean by this, friends from the media? Every economy goes through boom and bust cycles caused by either internal or external factors, or both. In line with these cycles, revenues increase during boom times and fall during recession. So a practical example, whereby you have a vibrant and robust economy, you could see economic activities increasing, and for that matter, government generates more revenue from businesses and entities. There are also periods that naturally business is slow, and for that matter, entities and companies do not generate enough income or revenue, and for that matter, government cannot realize more revenue from tax. So when some of these things occur, then government needs also to fall onto alternative financing means to finance its projects. So hence, for most governments, the only option during an economic slowdown is to borrow in order to revive the economy. And that is one of the reasons why you see the government of Ghana go to the international market or financing market to also borrow. Last but not the least is to fund infrastructural investment, of which we all crave for as Ghanaians. It is difficult to finance large public infrastructural investment from regular tax revenues alone. And this is something that, friends from the media, I challenge you to check with other countries globally, including the sub-Saharan region. For a country like Ghana, where tax and other revenues are constrained, whereby we have our tax to GDP ratio being very low in this context, borrowing becomes one of the major sources of funds for public investment in infrastructure, agriculture, as well as other social sectors like health and education. So after attaining the happy completion point and benefiting from substantial external debt reliefs, Ghana's debt to GDP ratio, which stood at 182% in 2000, dropped to 26% in 2006. It, however, went up marginally to 32% at the end of 2008 and reached an unsustainable level of 71% in 2014 and 73.1% at the end of 2016. And this information is captured in the press briefing by the Ministry of Finance, that is 9 February 2016, titled Ghana, the Turnaround Story. In 2017, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, the country's debt to GDP ratio declined for the first time since 2006 to 68.27%. The Ghanaian economy was rebased in 2018 and the 2013 constant prices were adopted. The economy became 24% larger or bigger, and therefore debt to GDP became smaller. The debt to GDP that was 73% or 73.1% in 2016 at 2006 constant prices became 57.06% using the 2013 or 2013 constant prices after the rebase of the economy. The debt to GDP moved up at a historical slow pace from 55.68% in December 2017 to 61.69% at the end of 2019. So something that was growing at 73.1% at the end of 2016, we had it marginally coming down and then maintaining a steady growth or increase. But unfortunately, this ballooned to 76.62% at the end of 2020 and further to 92.3% at the end of December 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, by August 2023, debt to GDP had declined to 66.4%. So this tells you how effective policies that were outlined really helped in managing our debt distress. It is important to highlight that the debt to GDP ratio is closely connected to sound fiscal policies. And for that matter, as far as the policies were effective, obviously, we expected the debt to GDP ratio to decline. And obviously from over 92% to 66%, which is a remarkable improvement. So this takes me to the next important economic variable, which is fiscal policy. Now, DI believes that government's fiscal consolidation strategy should be strongly based on excellent expenditure realignment and realistic revenue projection. To narrow the fiscal deficit and slow down the rate of borrowing in the coming years, it will require revenue generation and or expenditure realignment, all in support of the fact that the debt to GDP has been managed and has thus declined. Ghana ended a HIPC initiative in 2006, as I've already emphasized. Since that time, the public debt growth rate has outpaced that of domestic revenue. Just as Dr. Bawumia rightly put it in his recent speech, enough is enough. We cannot continue to do the same thing and expect different results. Things need to change. And here, there should be a paradigm shift. Domestic resource mobilization is the best way to finance our developmental projects. There is no substitute for domestic resource mobilization. Even if we succeed in borrowing, we still have to come back to raise domestic revenue to service our debt and also other infrastructure projects. In order to have a realistic and predictable revenue stream, we at DI believe that it is imperative to emphasize tax revenue. Because tax revenue is a function of GDP, it is less volatile and more predictable than non-tax revenue. Historically, the tax elasticity of GDP in Ghana has been 1.4%. In other words, for every 1% GDP growth rate, the tax revenue grows by 1.4%. To raise the tax GDP ratio from its current form of 13% to 20% by 2028, it will require a compounded or exponential growth in tax revenue compared with GDP. Friends from the media, a sustaining tax revenue growth rate should be 2.5 times the real GDP growth rate in every year. This is the target. And we at DI with these measures outlined, we agree with the measures outlined by Dr. Bawumia that clearly, if we want to stop borrowing and cut down borrowing, then we also need to enhance our tax to GDP ratio. To achieve this, we have to build a credible tax regime. And how can we build a credible tax regime? By implementing digitalization. For us to have a simplified tax regime, just as Dr. Bawumia posited, we need to enforce compliance and simplify the tax handle so that the country can still raise enough revenue without necessarily introducing new taxes or increasing the existing tax rate. So in other words, talking about increasing tax doesn't mean that we are going to burden our Ghanaians or Ghanaians need to be burdened with new tax. But we broaden the base so that each and everyone can contribute a quota. So DI wholly welcomes the flat rate tax, the filing of tax returns online, and widening the tax net so that everyone would pay their quota, as I have stated earlier on. It is not only DI, but other key stakeholders, such as GUTA, and I'm sure friends of the media, you would attest to this information. The AGI, the Abosu Spare Parts Dealers, academia, among others, have all embraced this vision espoused by Dr. Bawumia. That is to leverage digitalization in domestic resource mobilization. With this vision, DI believes Ghana will be able to meet the target of raising tax to GDP ratio to reach 20% by 2028. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, DI also believes linking the Ghana card and TIN will reduce and also reduce human interface in transactions and can help fight corruption and also reduce wastages, block all loopholes, and safeguard the fiscal framework. Considering that Ghana's capability to meet its debt obligations significantly impact its credit worthiness, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, we place significant emphasis on credit rating in the next subheading. So the next subheading that I'll be looking at will be solely based on credit rating, whereby we do a trend analysis of credit rating within particular years. So credit rating, friends from the media, is an expert evaluation of the probability that an individual or organization or country will meet their financial obligations promptly. So for example, if you go to borrow from a friend, the way your friends will talk about you to your other colleagues, oh, as for A, if you give him money, he pays on time. That is more or less mirroring a credit rating. And this determines whether your colleagues or friends will give you money or not. It assesses the likelihood of debt repayment, as I have said, and reflects the creditworthiness of a country through standing. So basically, the same concept applies here. For example, Standard & Poor, S&P, assesses the credit rating of a debtor by scrutinizing both qualitative and quantitative attributes of the entity, or in this case, a country like Ghana, under consideration. This information can originate from internal sources provided by the country, including audited financial statements and reports, as well as external sources such as analytical reports, published news articles, industry analysis, and forecasts or projections. By the end of 2008, when NPP was exiting from government, Standard & Poor, or S&P, had rated the Ghana or the Ghanaian economy B positive or B plus, with a stable outlook. However, under the NDC's oversight, the country's credit rating deteriorated to B minus with a negative outlook by April 2015. And friends from the media, I challenge you to cross-check this data. The country was saved from being pushed out of the international bond market when it immediately subscribed to the IMF Extended Credit Facility in 2014-2015. The rating improved in November 2015 to B minus with a stable outlook. However, under the guidance of the NPP, the credit rating continuously improved to B with a stable outlook by the end of 2019. Unfortunately, the rating started deteriorating in 2020 until the country was rated CC plus in 2022, making it impossible to access credit from the international bond market. One of the major reasons why the country had to go to the IMF for another extended credit facility. Considering the outlooks as steps, friends from the media, if we are considering credit rating as steps that we are climbing a staircase, like you see a staircase here going upwards. NDC between January 2009 and April 2016 pushed the country, that is Ghana, 7 steps backwards on the ladder of rating. That is from B positive with a stable outlook to a B minus with a negative outlook. Even though the outlook improved from negative to stable in November 2015, Ghana was still rated with the grade B minus. It is with this situation that the NPP inherited and managed to push the rating to B with a stable outlook. That is 3 steps upwards by the end of 2019. However, the country's credit rating relapsed to CC plus with negative outlook in 2022, and I've already explained the reasons behind this phenomenon. Friends from the media, I would like to state on record that while the NPP had 1 upgrade in its first term, however, the NDC never had any upgrade in the whole of their 8 years. In practical terms, while the NDC left a deficit of about 6 steps, so I told you if you are considering the outlook as steps, that you are climbing a ladder up. While the NDC left a deficit of about 6 steps in 8 years, the NPP, even including global exogenous shocks, has recorded a deficit of 3 steps in almost 7 years, with 2023 included. It is important to understand that, friends from the media, and I really want to emphasize this point, and you must take note of it very well. It is important to understand that a change in credit rating outlook is not equivalent to an upgrade. We contend that if the NDC's performance with credit rating was as good as NPP, the country could have avoided the ban from the international credit market in 2022. So the point here is very simple. Imagine someone moving you about 6 steps backwards, and someone also reduced these steps to 3. So if the other one who took you to 6 steps backwards had even taken you 3 like the NPP had done, we wouldn't have ended up in the IMF. That is the point we are trying to make here, because we wouldn't have been banned from going into the international finance market to borrow. So that is the critical point that I'm trying to emphasize here. And we have the table which provides the ratings in our presentation, and it was solely solved from the budget statement which is delivered by the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. So friends from the media, I also challenge you to also check with these facts. Now we come to primary balance. This is very, very also important, very important. Friends from the media, the primary balance represents the difference between the government's revenue, that is income, and its non-interest expenditure. The difference can be expressed as a percentage of GDP, and here I try to break these technical jargons down for your simplest understanding. In other words, friends from the media, the primary balance is akin to the difference between your monthly income and your monthly expenditure, excluding any funds allocated to repay debts such as your mortgage or car loan. So basically, when we talk about the primary balance, this is what it means. Ghana, friends from the media, recorded a primary surplus of 434.5 million Ghana cedis, which is the equivalent of 0.2% of GDP in 2017. Specifically, this positive primary balance was recorded for the first time in 15 years. Ghana continuously recorded positive primary balance in 2018 and 2019. Unfortunately, in 2020 and 2022, the country recorded negative primary balance. However, at the first half of 2023, the country again recorded a positive primary balance. Just as Dr. Bawumia rightly noted in his recent speech, a primary surplus as observed in 2017, 2018, and 2019 and 2023 allow us as a country to manage our debt obligations and reduce our overall debt burden. So it is not that surprising that our debt to GDP ratio has declined phenomenally. By reallocating our expenditures and reducing our debt, we can generate the much needed fiscal space that government requires. This in turn can be utilized to fund projects aimed at invigorating the Ghanaian economy. Ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, so as I am trying to conclude or bring my statement to a conclusion, the comprehensive data presented thus far to you demonstrate that the NPP holds a distinct positive track record of performance over the NDC and are therefore the better managers of the Ghanaian economy based on the face of the facts. And as I have repeated unequivocally, I challenge you to check these facts. I've given you the sources: the Bank of Ghana, the Ghana Statistical Service, and also the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. The empirical evidence encompassing the various economic indicators, GDP growth, inflation, exchange rate, debt to GDP, fiscal policy, credit rating, and primary balance, underscores the efficacy of the NPP's policies in fostering economic growth, stability, and resilience. From fiscal responsibility to debt management, the NPP's track record showcases a commitment to sound economic principles, notwithstanding global exogenous shocks. In contrast, the NDC's historical performance raises concerns, especially in the areas outlined in our presentation. The data underscores instances where the NDC's governance was marked by economic challenges, even though there were no exogenous shocks, raising questions about the effectiveness of their policies. Moreover, the NPP's ability to navigate global economic challenges and maintain a positive trajectory amid external shocks sets it apart. The resilience displayed by the NPP in steering the Ghanaian economy towards sustainable development is evident in the positive outcomes being witnessed now. And as I talked about, debt to GDP had actually decreased to 66.4%, even if you are using the 2014-2015 as a base, which was almost 73%. Today, it is better than then, notwithstanding the global exogenous shocks that the country experienced within this short period. In light of these findings, friends from the media, it is imperative for Ghanaians to carefully evaluate the economic track records of both parties as they make informed decisions about the future leadership of our dear nation, Ghana. Friends from the media, the Dankwa Institute will come your way every month with more of such analysis. God bless our homeland, Ghana, and make us strong. Thank you very much for coming and also listening to us. Yes. So if you would permit me, friends from the media, I would like to provide a summary of all that I've said in Twi for viewership to also have an understanding of what we have said. Nti me maame no me papa no ne adofo a mo hwe na mutie ye. Ensem a me aka ni nyina ne tofa me boye ne se wo hwe eye Ghana economy ne anase yisika esem ho ntotoye a se o fa no free ebre a eye omampanyi a watwam ko eye owura akofo ebefa oman ni bebi oja no ene bebi ayewura atamilsa wonu so enya ne baby ko ebefa ya ansa na ofima nanka Ghana nanka yegina empempesuo bi a nanka yebeka na sesenka ye ahoden anenka yebeka se ahoden wo ye namu pa nanso ye fafri eye 2013 edi ba besi 2016 omampanyi dada John Dramani Mahama ebefro akunya no eye Ghana sikasam enho totoye no eto ape ema ebedru bia na kyese ye sikasam no enkoye kura na ewo se emfa hompo ni se nanka COVID-19 eni wiase ena na Russia so Ukraine emfa ntokwa bia enhyehye so no na ewo se ye sakọ IMF na ye kopẹ ahoto enu be ya ade bia amoa Ghana sebo be kaya anesefo eni teacherfo kra binumu ye adwuma BS afi baako ne afi mienu a ye hye BS afi ne emufa egu ye ka se BS bosome miensa na se enan ekosi nsia pesika ena ye betua eso sabre no se na ye ka na COVID-19 emaye eye yare kodiewu a ebesinsen wiase no na eni ho na se ofa no 2017 ebra eye ye papa na Akufo-Addo ebefra akunye na sikasam totoye na ato apena na eduntinu sebio so ye teacher ni anase wo ye nurse ni na ye fo adwuma foforo ye adwuma bi emfie mienu a ye se ebetua bosome miensa ne na sika na ma ona san hyehye no ye bebogu ye ema afi na wo ye adwuma na ye tumi tua wo sika nyina ma afi Ghana economy no esa be fa ne ntoma pa efraya etumi pagya ne mu from eye oha enchichemu mienu ene echiripo enkron ekoduru oha echichemu enwotwe na echiro se sikasam totoye no na akọ nanimu yie pa de ebiam so a meka ho asem ne se ofa bibi te se inflation twimu ne beka ne sene enoma ebo etumi epagya ne mu ekosoro pa no se o hwe eye afe eye 2013 ebesi 2016 inflation itumi pagya ne mu ama ebeduru bebi no na yeduru oha enchichemu edunsu ne echiripo enso na abeye ahotete ama Ghanafo sabre ya bunsu no na dum so eku Ghanafo na COVID-19 pediewo no emesen ewiase enso na Ghanafo ehotete wo mo pa na enso se ohwe efri eye 2017 na Akufo-Addo ebefro akunye na empo ekosi 20 eye 18 19 mu ho na inflation na ekọ yakoduru eye oha nchichemu edunso ne echiripo enso no etibo formal be duru oha nchichemu enso eni echiripo kakra na eye inflation na tese ewo form kra in almost enfie aduonu nwotwe a na ebinsi wo Ghana hada na echo se ampa amamuo no ekoye pa ema Ghanafo na enyina edi adanse se ye ho etoye amamuo no koye nyina echi no eye free SHS kra so esaba be pay so ema Ghanafo enya hoto a school fees impona oba enya admission so okọ eye senior high school a unkotua school fees ene bire dan ho na sa amamuo papa ya ye ka ho asem ya ena fofie anto ata se ne ye ka ne se eni papa bi antena ewiase nche anase onyine nche ena COVID-19 pedie wei ye ni bebi efri ebebo amanwe semimu ebe ma sikasem ho ye dendenden sebi wo hwe Ghana bebi ayenye sika free pa eye foma gudie ene enioma yenye free eye kuayo mu na saa no menso no aya nanka ye de kọ amanone na ye kọton na nam se COVID-19 pedi wo no be bae na sabio abrochire companies nyina ya tutum enti hwan kra na wo de wo nyoma akọkọma ne se ontoma at the same time shape okro de be fa no me free ye tamahabo akọ China anasa America memu akọtọ saa nyoma no shape no kra se ono so enye adwuma na je se wo sika sem no eho abeye den pa se sabio se oye obema mpo a na je se obetumi aboyira akohoma eti se okopeden besia firi wonyonko bi a se bia ne nsemu ye ewo bi pa ansa na wetumi ade ababo oyira akohoma na saa pepepe ene Ghana oman eyeye ntina akoduru bi a eye ntumi hwe se Ghanafo omo becho mo se bio kombedi omo waye adwuma abosom yaso yese o COVID nti aban ni sikanti entua aka da wo se aban to bi fa kwan bi so a obenye sika edi etua enipaka nti ma aban no ekobo besia ema ye besia bo anase ka ye de no epegya ne mu ekosoro yi kakra nti foni a mi twa nyina ne se wo hwe eye NDC aban amamuo na se wo hwe eye MPP aban amamuo a chese ensonsre kakraka ne dentemu se o fa ne se ka COVID anase ntokwa bia ma wiase na yesi ye di ne kuradie mu se hwan de tumi etoto amammuo hu enioma yie ananse hye hu ye di a nenka ensem ya mabobosi de nenka eye MPP aban enenim amammuo hu enioma entoto ye medamase bebre